There are moments in life when people believe they have you completely figured out. They look at the way you carry yourself, the calmness in your behavior, and the patience in the way you respond to situations, and they make a quiet assumption about who you are. In their mind, your kindness means innocence. Your patience means weakness. Your silence means you are unaware of what is happening around you. Because of this misunderstanding, they begin to move differently around you. They speak with a little more confidence, take a few more liberties, and sometimes even attempt things they would never try with someone they believed was fully aware. What they do not realize is that they are misreading the situation entirely. The very qualities they interpret as naivety are actually signs of something far deeper. Your calmness is not confusion. Your patience is not ignorance. Your silence is not blindness. It is awareness operating quietly beneath the surface.
While they believed they were observing you, you were actually observing everything. You noticed the subtle shifts in tone, the small inconsistencies in behavior, the moments where words and actions no longer matched. Instead of reacting immediately, you allowed the situation to unfold naturally. This gave you something they did not have: clarity. And clarity is powerful because it reveals the full picture before any decision needs to be made. What they thought was a simple situation where they had the advantage slowly began turning into something else entirely. Without realizing it, they were exposing their own intentions, while you remained steady and composed. Then, eventually, the moment arrived when the truth became impossible to ignore. The same person they believed was naive suddenly demonstrated a level of awareness, control, and strength they never expected. In that instant, the entire dynamic changed.
The roles they had imagined were reversed, and they realized something that surprised them completely. The person they underestimated was the one who had understood the entire situation from the very beginning. They mistook your kindness for weakness. Begins with a misunderstanding that has existed for as long as human interaction itself. In many environments, people learn to measure strength through the loudest signals they can see. They associate power with dominance, control with aggression, and confidence with the constant need to assert oneself over others. When someone speaks loudly, pushes their opinions forcefully, or reacts immediately to every challenge, observers often interpret those behaviors as proof of authority. Because these patterns appear so frequently in daily life, many individuals unconsciously begin using them as their primary way of evaluating others.
They believe that whoever reacts the fastest must be the strongest.
Whoever argues the loudest must be the most confident. And whoever demands attention must hold the most control. Yet when they encounter someone like you, that familiar system of measurement begins to fail. Your presence does not rely on those signals. Instead of rushing to dominate conversations, you listen carefully. Instead of reacting instantly when tension appears, you pause. Instead of forcing your voice into every moment, you choose your words with intention. To people who are used to reading strength through noise and speed, this calm approach becomes confusing. They look at your patience and assume you lack awareness. They see your kindness and interpret it as vulnerability. They notice that you do not compete for attention, and they mistakenly conclude that you have none to command. In their minds, they quietly place you into a category that feels safe for them to manage. Someone gentle, someone agreeable, someone unlikely to challenge them directly. This is the moment where the misunderstanding begins to grow. Because once someone believes you are naive, their behavior toward you begins to change. They may speak more freely around you, assuming you will not question their words. They may test small boundaries, curious to see how far they can push without encountering resistance. They may even attempt subtle forms of manipulation, believing they are interacting with someone who will not recognize the pattern. What they do not realize is that your kindness was never a sign of weakness to begin with. It was a choice, and that distinction changes everything. Kindness that emerges from ignorance is fragile because it depends on not knowing what is happening. But kindness that comes from awareness is powerful because it exists alongside understanding.
When you choose patience, it is not because you cannot see the situation clearly. It is because you have decided that reacting immediately would not serve the moment. When you offer respect to others, it is not because you feel inferior or uncertain. It is because you recognize that dignity costs nothing and reveals character far more effectively than aggression ever could. These choices create a quiet strength that many people struggle to recognize at first. Because they are accustomed to equating strength with visible dominance, they overlook the deeper stability that patience requires. It takes far more control to remain calm in a tense situation than it does to raise one's voice. It requires greater awareness to listen fully before responding than to react impulsively to every comment. Yet these forms of discipline rarely appear dramatic from the outside, and because of that, they are frequently underestimated. People mistake restraint for hesitation and composure for passivity. But beneath that calm surface lies something they did not expect: observation. While they are busy interpreting your behavior according to their assumptions, you are quietly noticing everything. You observe the subtle shifts in how they treat others. You hear the tone behind their words, not just the words themselves. You recognize the difference between genuine friendliness and behavior that carries hidden intentions. This awareness grows over time as situations unfold. Patterns begin revealing themselves through repetition. Someone who appears supportive one day may reveal inconsistency the next. A friendly comment may carry a slight edge that becomes clearer with context. Because you are not rushing to react, you allow these details to accumulate naturally. Each moment adds another piece to the picture forming in your mind. Meanwhile, those who underestimated you continue behaving as though their assumptions were correct. They believe they are navigating the situation easily because they see no immediate challenge. The absence of confrontation reinforces their confidence. They interpret your patience as confirmation that they were right about you all along. But what they fail to understand is that your quiet observation is not passive. It is preparation. You are allowing reality to reveal itself completely before deciding how to respond. This approach gives you something that impulsive reactions cannot provide: clarity. Instead of responding to isolated moments, you begin understanding the entire pattern behind them. You see the motivations driving certain behaviors and the insecurities influencing certain actions. By the time others realize the situation is shifting, you already understand the dynamics at play. And when the moment finally arrives that requires a response, your clarity changes everything. Because now, your words are not reactions to a single event. They are reflections of everything you have quietly observed along the way. For the people who underestimated you, this realization can be startling. They expected someone uncertain, someone easily guided by external influence. Instead, they encounter someone who understands the situation more deeply than they imagined possible. The patience they once interpreted as weakness suddenly appears as discipline. The kindness they dismissed as naivety reveals itself as strength grounded in self-control. In that moment, their entire perception of you begins shifting.
They recognized that the calm presence they once ignored actually held a level of awareness they had overlooked. And this shift often carries an important lesson, not only for them, but for anyone witnessing the situation unfold. True strength rarely announces itself loudly. It does not always demand recognition or prove itself through conflict. Sometimes it appears quietly, in the form of patience, clarity, and composure. It observes before reacting, understands before speaking, and waits for the moment when truth becomes visible without unnecessary force. When people encounter this kind of strength, it challenges their assumptions about what power truly looks like. They begin realizing that the loudest voice in the room is not always the strongest one. Sometimes, the person who seemed the most gentle was actually the most aware all along. And that awareness, once revealed, becomes impossible to ignore. The moment they tried to take advantage began quietly, almost invisibly, the way many situations of misunderstanding often do. After forming their assumption about you, they slowly began adjusting their behavior based on the belief that you were someone who would not notice what they were doing. In their mind, the situation felt safe. They believed they had already figured out your character. And because of that belief, they felt comfortable moving in ways they might not have dared to attempt with someone they perceived as more confrontational. This is how subtle power dynamics often begin to form. When someone believes another person lacks awareness or strength, they begin testing small boundaries first. It might start with something almost insignificant. A comment delivered with a slightly dismissive tone. A decision made without including you. Or a quiet attempt to shift responsibility in your direction while they avoided accountability themselves. These small actions rarely appear dramatic from the outside. And because of that, they are easy for others to overlook. But to someone who observes carefully, they form the first pieces of a larger pattern. What they thought were harmless moves gradually became part of a behavior that revealed their true intentions. At first, they watched your reaction carefully. When you did not immediately challenge them, their confidence began to grow. Your patience reinforced the story they had already created in their minds. They assumed your silence meant you did not see what they were doing. In reality, your silence was simply observation. You were allowing the situation to unfold naturally, gathering information instead of rushing into confrontation. This patience gave you an advantage they did not recognize. Because when someone believes they are unobserved, they eventually reveal far more than they intend. As time passed, their actions became bolder. What began as subtle tests slowly evolved into clearer attempts to control the situation. They may have spoken about you differently when you were not present, assuming their words would never reach your ears. They may have taken credit for ideas, opportunities, or efforts they believed you would never challenge. Perhaps they attempted to create the impression that they held authority over situations where they actually had very little. These behaviors were not always malicious in the sense of deliberate cruelty. Sometimes they were simply driven by ego, insecurity, or the desire to gain recognition. But regardless of the motivation, the pattern remained the same. They believed you were unaware, and that belief allowed them to behave in ways that ultimately revealed their own character. Meanwhile, your awareness continued expanding quietly beneath the surface of these interactions. Instead of reacting to each moment individually, you allowed yourself to see the entire pattern forming. Every conversation, every decision, every small shift in behavior added another layer to the understanding you were developing. You noticed how their tone changed depending on who was present. You saw how their confidence increased when they believed they held the upper hand. You recognized how their words sometimes contradicted their actions. Each of these details formed part of a larger picture that only someone patient enough to observe could fully understand. What they failed to realize was that the longer the situation continued, the clearer that picture became. Their attempts to take advantage were not strengthening their position. They were revealing it. Every step they took based on the assumption that you were naive was actually providing you with deeper clarity about who they were and how they operated. This is one of the quiet truths about awareness that many people overlook. When someone reacts immediately to every situation, they often interrupt the natural process through which truth reveals itself. But when someone observes carefully and allows behavior to unfold naturally, reality eventually becomes impossible to hide. Patterns emerge, intentions become visible, and the full dynamic of the situation reveals itself without requiring dramatic confrontation. During this time, the person who believed they were gaining control often experiences a false sense of success. Because you did not challenge them immediately, they assumed their strategy was working. They believed they had outmaneuvered you. This confidence encouraged them to continue behaving in the same way, which only strengthened the pattern they had already begun to reveal. What they did not understand was that their own actions were gradually building the very moment that would eventually expose the truth. Situations like this often reach a turning point when circumstances force clarity into the open. Perhaps a conversation occurs where the details of the situation become impossible to ignore. Maybe another person notices the pattern and brings it into the light. Or sometimes the person who believed they held the advantage simply pushes the situation too far, revealing their intentions so clearly that everyone present begins to recognize what has been happening. When that moment arrives, it carries a powerful shift in perspective. The same people who once believed you were unaware suddenly realize something surprising. You were not blind to the situation at all. You had been watching, understanding, and allowing the truth to unfold. The patience they interpreted as weakness now appears as strategy. The silence they dismissed as ignorance now reveals itself as observation. This realization can be deeply uncomfortable for the person who attempted to take advantage, because the moment they recognize your awareness, they also recognize that their own behavior has been visible all along. The dynamic they believed they controlled suddenly reverses. Instead of feeling confident, they begin questioning their own actions. Instead of believing they held the upper hand, they realize they may have misunderstood the situation completely. For those observing the situation from the outside, the shift is equally striking. They see how the person who appeared quiet and patient actually possessed the clearest understanding of the entire situation. They realize that the calm individual who did not rush into confrontation was actually the one who saw the full pattern forming long before anyone else noticed it. This realization often changes how others interpret strength and awareness moving forward. They begin recognizing that true perception does not always reveal itself immediately. Sometimes it waits quietly while situations unfold, gathering clarity before responding. In this way, the moment someone attempted to take advantage of you became more than just a misunderstanding. It became the turning point where truth began revealing itself to everyone involved. What started as an assumption about your weakness slowly transformed into the discovery of your awareness. And by the time the full situation became visible, the person who thought they were controlling the outcome realized something they never expected. They had misread the entire story from the very beginning. You were observing the entire time. Becomes the turning point that many people never anticipated, because while they believed they were operating freely within a situation they controlled, you were quietly watching everything unfold with a level of awareness they did not recognize. Observation is a powerful form of intelligence, yet it is often underestimated in environments where people value speed and reaction over patience and clarity. Most individuals move through situations quickly, reacting to what appears in front of them without taking the time to step back and examine the deeper patterns shaping those moments.
Because of this, they often assume that someone who remains quiet or calm must be unaware of what is happening. They interpret silence as absence rather than attention. Yet what they failed to realize about you is that your quietness was never emptiness. It was focus. While they were busy creating narratives about what they believed you understood, your mind was collecting details they overlooked. You noticed the small inconsistencies in their words, the subtle shifts in their behavior when different people entered the room, and the way their tone changed depending on the situation. None of these observations required dramatic reactions in the moment. Instead, they formed a growing awareness that allowed you to understand the full dynamic of what was unfolding around you. This ability to observe without reacting immediately is rare, because it requires discipline that most people have never practiced. When something unexpected happens, the human mind instinctively wants to respond right away.
Emotions rise quickly, thoughts race forward, and reactions often emerge before understanding has fully formed. But you chose a different approach. Rather than allowing the first impulse to dictate your response, you paused. That pause created space, and within that space, awareness expanded. You were not just seeing what was happening in isolated moments. You were recognizing patterns that connected those moments together. For example, when someone spoke with a tone that carried hidden disrespect, you did not immediately confront them. Instead, you noticed how often that tone appeared and in what circumstances it emerged. When a decision was made that excluded you or attempted to shift responsibility unfairly, you observed how frequently those choices occurred and who benefited from them. Each situation became another piece of a larger pattern, revealing itself over time.
While others were reacting emotionally to individual events, you were seeing the entire structure forming beneath those events. This difference in perception gave you a profound advantage, because when someone understands the full pattern behind a situation, they are not easily manipulated by isolated moments. Instead of reacting to every small provocation, you were allowing the truth to reveal itself gradually. And the truth, when allowed to unfold naturally, often becomes far clearer than any argument or accusation could make it. Meanwhile, the individuals who believed you were unaware continued behaving according to the assumptions they had formed. Their confidence grew because they saw no immediate resistance from you. They believed they were operating in a space where their intentions remained hidden. In reality, their actions were becoming more visible with every step they took. The longer they continued acting according to their misunderstanding, the more clearly their behavior revealed their motivations. This is one of the quiet principles of awareness that many people fail to understand. When someone believes they are unseen, they reveal far more about themselves than they intend. They speak more freely, behave more boldly, and expose patterns that would otherwise remain concealed. Because you allowed that process to unfold without interruption, the clarity you gained became far deeper than anything a quick confrontation could have achieved. Your observation was not passive. It was active understanding. You were seeing how personalities interacted, how insecurities shaped decisions, and how certain individuals attempted to gain control through subtle manipulation. This awareness allowed you to remain steady, even when others expected emotional reactions from you. They anticipated anger, confusion, or confrontation. But because you already understood the situation more clearly than they did, those reactions were unnecessary. Instead, you continued watching as the pattern became more and more visible to anyone willing to see it. What made this moment especially powerful was the contrast between perception and reality. To them,
It seemed as though they were controlling the situation. To you, it was becoming increasingly clear how the situation would eventually reveal itself. This difference created a quiet shift in power that most people around you did not immediately notice. Power in situations like this does not always belong to the person speaking the loudest or acting the boldest. Sometimes it belongs to the person who understands the full picture, while others are still reacting to fragments of it. As time passed, the situation slowly reached a point where the truth could no longer remain hidden behind assumptions.
The patterns that had once appeared subtle began revealing themselves more openly. Other people in the environment started noticing the same inconsistencies you had been observing all along. Conversations began reflecting the tension that had previously remained beneath the surface. In those moments, the awareness you had developed quietly over time became visible to everyone else. The person who believed you were naive suddenly faced a reality they had not considered. They realized that you had not been blind to their behavior. You had been watching it carefully. The patience they once interpreted as weakness now appeared as discipline. The silence they thought indicated ignorance now revealed itself as deliberate observation. This realization often creates a powerful shift in the way people view you. The quiet individual they believed they understood suddenly appears far more perceptive than they imagined. They begin questioning how much you noticed during those earlier moments. They wonder what else you may have seen that they overlooked themselves. And as this awareness spreads through the environment, the dynamic changes in ways they did not expect. Respect often replaces the assumptions that once existed. Because people recognize that observation requires a level of awareness that impulsive reactions cannot provide. They begin understanding that your patience was never about avoiding conflict. It was about understanding the situation completely before choosing how to respond. This deeper form of awareness transforms the entire meaning of your earlier silence. What once seemed like passivity now appears as strength guided by clarity. And once that clarity becomes visible, it reshapes the entire narrative surrounding who you are. The person they believed was naive becomes the person they realize had the clearest vision of the situation all along. Instead of reacting, you stayed calm, became the moment where everything began shifting in a way no one expected. Because when people believe they have successfully pushed someone into a corner, they almost always anticipate a reaction. Human behavior has long been conditioned around predictable emotional responses. When someone feels disrespected, they are expected to become defensive. When someone senses they are being manipulated, anger often rises quickly. When pressure builds in an environment, voices get louder, tension escalates, and reactions become impulsive. These emotional patterns are so common that many people assume they are inevitable. They believe that once a situation reaches a certain level of tension, an explosive reaction must follow. This expectation is exactly what those who underestimated you were counting on. In their minds, they had already imagined the outcome of the situation they were creating. They believed that eventually you would react emotionally, reveal frustration, or confront them in a way that would allow them to control the narrative. Perhaps they even hoped your reaction would make you appear unstable or overly sensitive, reinforcing the false perception they had already formed about you. But what they never considered was the possibility that you would remain calm. And that calmness became the most powerful disruption to everything they thought they understood. When tension began rising and their actions reached the point where most people would have reacted impulsively, you did something different. You paused. Instead of allowing the emotional energy of the moment to pull you into the chaos they were expecting, you remained steady. This pause was not hesitation. It was awareness. You understood that reacting emotionally would only strengthen the illusion they were trying to create. When someone is attempting to manipulate a situation,
They often rely on provoking a reaction that benefits their narrative. They want a moment they can point to as evidence of the story they have been telling others. But by staying calm, you removed that opportunity entirely. Your composure disrupted the script they had already written in their minds. In that moment, something subtle but profound happened in the environment around you. The emotional momentum that had been building suddenly lost direction. Those who were expecting an argument found themselves facing silence instead. Those who were waiting for confrontation encountered composure. Without the reaction they had anticipated, the situation began shifting in ways they could not easily control. People around you started noticing the difference immediately. They could see the tension in the room, yet your presence remained grounded. While others became uneasy or uncertain, you appeared steady, as though the pressure in the environment did not affect your clarity. This contrast created a powerful effect. When one person remains calm in the middle of emotional chaos, it exposes how reactive everyone else has been. Suddenly, the focus shifts away from the conflict itself and toward the person who refuses to participate in it. Observers begin questioning the narrative they previously accepted. They notice that the individual who is supposedly naive or unaware is actually the most composed person in the room. Meanwhile, the people who believed they were controlling the situation begin feeling the tension they created turning back toward them. Without your reaction to feed their momentum, their behavior starts becoming more visible to others. The subtle manipulations they once believed were hidden now appear obvious in contrast to your calm response. The more composed you remained, the more their actions revealed themselves. What once looked like confidence in their strategy began appearing more like insecurity or desperation. This is one of the most powerful effects of calmness in moments of conflict. Calmness does not just prevent escalation, it creates clarity. When emotions dominate a situation, truth becomes difficult to see because everyone is reacting simultaneously. But when one person refuses to be pulled into that cycle, the entire environment begins slowing down. Conversations become quieter. Observers start noticing details they previously overlooked, and the real dynamics of the situation begin revealing themselves naturally. Your calmness allowed this process to happen. Instead of becoming part of the chaos, you became the still point around which the chaos began dissolving. That stillness communicated something powerful without requiring many words. It showed that you understood the situation more clearly than anyone expected. It demonstrated that your emotions were not easily manipulated by external pressure. And most importantly, it revealed that you were not operating according to the assumptions others had made about you. For those who initially underestimated you, this realization began creating discomfort. Because when someone expects to control a situation through provocation, the absence of reaction leaves them exposed. They start questioning whether their strategy was flawed from the beginning. They begin noticing that others in the room are observing them more carefully now. The confidence they once felt begins fading, replaced by uncertainty about how to proceed. Meanwhile, your calm presence continues reshaping the dynamic around you. The more composed you remain, the more people begin understanding that your silence was never weakness. It was control. It showed that you were not reacting from emotion, but responding from awareness. This difference is subtle, but profound. Reaction comes from impulse, while response comes from understanding. Reaction seeks immediate release, while response waits for the moment when clarity will have the greatest impact. By choosing composure instead of reaction, you demonstrated a level of discipline that many people never develop. Emotional control is often misunderstood as detachment, but in reality, it reflects a deeper form of strength. It means recognizing what you feel without allowing those feelings to dictate your behavior. It means understanding the situation fully before deciding how to act. And it means maintaining dignity even when others attempt to provoke you into losing it. As the situation continued unfolding, the power of that discipline became increasingly visible. Observers began recognizing that the person who appeared most in control of themselves was you. The individuals who once believed they were manipulating the environment now appeared unsettled by the consequences of their own actions. And the narrative they had attempted to build around you began collapsing under the weight of your calm presence. In the end, the moment that was meant to expose your weakness instead revealed your strength. What they expected to be an emotional reaction became a demonstration of awareness. What they believed would be your downfall became the moment that shifted the entire dynamic of the situation. And as everyone present began recognizing what had truly happened, one thing became impossible to ignore. The person they thought they could control had actually been the most composed and aware individual in the room from the very beginning. Your response shifted the entire power dynamic. Became the moment when everything that had been quietly building beneath the surface finally moved into the open.
Up until this point, the situation had been unfolding according to the assumptions others had made about you. They believed they understood your personality. They believed they knew how you would react. They believed they had already mapped out the outcome of the situation they had created. Their confidence rested entirely on the idea that they were interacting with someone unaware, someone passive, someone who would simply absorb whatever pressure was placed upon them. But the moment you finally responded, that entire structure collapsed. Because what they encountered was not the reaction they had prepared themselves for. It was clarity. And clarity has a way of reorganizing a situation instantly, because it exposes the truth that confusion once concealed. Your response did not need to be dramatic or aggressive. In fact, the strength of it often lies in its calm precision. When someone has been observing a situation for a long time, when they have allowed patterns to reveal themselves naturally, their words carry a weight that impulsive reactions never achieve. You were not speaking from emotion alone. You were speaking from understanding. Every detail you had quietly noticed, every inconsistency you had observed, every moment that had seemed insignificant to others, now formed the foundation of your response. What surprised them most was not necessarily what you said. It was how clearly you understood the entire situation. Suddenly they realized that the person they believed was naive had been aware all along. The quiet patience they once interpreted as weakness now revealed itself as discipline. The calmness they thought indicated ignorance now appeared as control. And the silence they dismissed as passivity now showed itself to be observation that had been unfolding the entire time. This realization created an immediate shift in the power dynamic of the situation. Power in human interactions often depends less on force and more on perception. When people believe someone is unaware or easily manipulated, they behave confidently around them. But the moment they recognize that their assumptions were wrong, that confidence disappears. They begin questioning their own behavior, replaying the situation in their mind, realizing how many moments they misjudged. The person who once seemed easy to control suddenly appears far more perceptive than they expected. That change in perception alone can transform the entire environment. Observers who had previously accepted the narrative surrounding you begin seeing the situation differently. They start recognizing that the calm individual they underestimated actually possessed the clearest understanding of what was happening. They notice the contrast between your composure
and the uncertainty appearing in those who attempted to manipulate the situation. Slowly, the focus shifts. Instead of questioning your awareness, people begin questioning the intentions of those who tried to take advantage of you. This is how clarity changes power. It does not need to shout or demand attention. It simply reveals the truth in a way that cannot easily be ignored. When someone who has been quietly observing finally speaks with understanding, their words carry authority because they reflect reality rather than assumption. And once reality becomes visible, the illusions that once protected manipulation begin dissolving quickly. The individuals who believed they controlled the situation often experience a moment of shock when this shift occurs. They realize that their earlier confidence was built on a misunderstanding. The strategies they thought were clever now appear obvious. The subtle behaviors they believed were hidden now seem transparent to everyone watching. In that moment, the control they once felt slips away. Because control based on deception cannot survive once awareness enters the situation. Meanwhile, your presence begins influencing the environment in a different way. Instead of being seen as the quiet individual who tolerated everything, you now appear as the person who understood everything before anyone else did. People recognize the discipline required to remain calm while observing the situation unfold. They see that your patience was not weakness, but strategy guided by clarity. And that recognition creates respect that did not exist before. Respect in these situations often grows from a simple realization. You never needed to dominate the situation to understand it. You never needed to raise your voice or compete for control. Your strength came from awareness, and awareness allowed you to choose the exact moment when your response would have the greatest impact. By waiting until the full pattern of behavior had revealed itself, you allowed the truth to stand on its own. This is why your response shifted the power dynamic so dramatically. Because power built on manipulation depends on secrecy and confusion. When clarity arrives, that structure cannot survive. Those who attempted to shape the narrative now find themselves exposed by their own actions. And those who once doubted your awareness now see the situation through an entirely different lens. In many ways, this moment becomes a quiet turning point not only for you, but for everyone present. People begin reconsidering how they interpret calmness and patience. They realize that the person who speaks the least is not always the least aware. They begin understanding that true strength often appears quiet because it does not need constant recognition to exist. And as this understanding spreads through the environment, the narrative surrounding you changes permanently. You are no longer seen as someone who can be easily underestimated. Instead, you become the example of what awareness looks like when it operates without ego or noise. Your calm response becomes the moment people remember when they think about the situation. It demonstrates that composure can carry more authority than aggression. It shows that patience can reveal more truth than confrontation. And it reminds everyone present that the person who appears quiet may actually be the one who understands the entire dynamic more clearly than anyone else in the room. In that moment, the misunderstanding that began the situation finally dissolves. The same individuals who once believed you were naive now recognize something entirely different. They see someone who waited, observed, and responded with clarity at exactly the right moment. And once that realization settles into their awareness, the power dynamic of the entire situation changes in a way that cannot easily be reversed. Now they see you differently becomes the natural consequence of everything that has already unfolded. Because once the truth of a situation is revealed, perception rarely returns to the way it once was. Human beings build their understanding of others through patterns, assumptions, and repeated interactions. When someone appears calm, patient, and non-confrontational, many individuals unconsciously interpret those qualities through a limited lens. They categorize that person as gentle, agreeable, perhaps even naive. This interpretation becomes comfortable because it allows them to behave without questioning their own intentions too deeply.
Yet when reality breaks through that assumption, when the person they underestimated reveals awareness, clarity, and control, the entire mental image they had constructed begins to collapse. This is exactly the moment that now surrounds you. The same individuals who once believed they had you figured out suddenly find themselves looking at you with completely different eyes. They replay earlier interactions in their mind, recognizing details they previously overlooked. They remember the calm way you responded to situations that might have provoked others. They recall the patience you showed when tensions were rising. And now, with the understanding of what truly happened, those moments take on an entirely new meaning. What once appeared as passivity now reveals itself as discipline. What once looked like uncertainty now appears as quiet confidence. This shift in perception does not always happen loudly. In many cases, it unfolds silently within the minds of the people observing you. They may not immediately admit their earlier misjudgment, but their behavior begins to change in subtle ways. The tone they use when speaking to you becomes more respectful. The assumptions they once made about your awareness slowly fade. And the casual confidence they once displayed when interacting with you becomes replaced by a careful attention to how they present themselves. This transformation often begins with a simple realization. They understand now that you see far more than you reveal. That realization carries a quiet power because it alters the way people behave in your presence. When someone believes they are unobserved, they act freely according to their impulses. But when they recognize that another person possesses deep awareness, their behavior becomes more intentional. They start considering their words more carefully. They think about how their actions might be interpreted.
In essence, your presence begins influencing the environment, not through force, but through the clarity people now associate with you. Observers who once underestimated you begin noticing something else as well. They recognize that your strength never relied on proving anything aggressively. You did not need dramatic confrontations to reveal your awareness. Instead, you allowed truth to emerge through patience, timing, and composure. This approach challenges many people's previous ideas about what authority looks like. In many environments, authority is associated with loud leadership, constant assertion, or visible control over others. But what they witnessed in you was different. Your authority appeared through restraint. You allowed situations to unfold until the right moment arrived, and when that moment came, your clarity reshaped the entire dynamic without unnecessary conflict. This realization often inspires both admiration and reflection in those who witness the situation.
They begin asking themselves how someone develops that level of calm awareness. They notice how easily emotions can disrupt most situations, yet you remained steady, even when tension was building around you. This steadiness creates a new form of respect, because people recognize the discipline required to maintain composure under pressure. Emotional control is one of the most difficult skills to master, and seeing someone demonstrate it naturally makes others reconsider the way they interpret strength. As this understanding spreads through the environment, the narrative surrounding you evolves. Instead of being seen as the quiet person who tolerates everything, you become recognized as the individual who understands more than most people realize. This shift does not necessarily turn you into the center of attention, and in many cases, you would not want it to. But it does change the way people approach you.
Conversations become more thoughtful. Interactions carry more sincerity.
Even those who once attempted to take advantage of your patience now behave differently because they understand that their earlier assumptions were mistaken. For the individuals who misjudged you the most, this realization can create a mixture of emotions. Some may feel embarrassment when they recognize how completely they misunderstood your character. They remember the confidence with which they believed they had outsmarted you, only to discover that you had been aware all along. Others may feel a quiet form of respect growing within them, even if they never openly express it. They see the composure you maintained and recognize that such control requires a level of maturity they may still be developing themselves. In some cases, people even begin seeking your perspective more actively. Because once someone realizes you see the deeper patterns behind situations, they start valuing that insight. They notice that your observations often reveal truths that others overlook. Your ability to remain calm while analyzing a situation becomes something they respect and sometimes even rely on. This is how awareness gradually transforms into influence. Not through domination, but through the trust people place in someone who consistently demonstrates clarity. Yet the most important transformation in this moment is not only how others see you, it is also how the entire environment begins adjusting around the presence you bring into it. When one person demonstrates calm awareness in a difficult situation, it subtly raises the standard of behavior for everyone else. People begin realizing that emotional manipulation, hidden agendas, and quiet disrespect cannot survive easily in a space where awareness is present. Your composure exposes those behaviors without needing to confront them aggressively. Simply by remaining steady and clear, you make it harder for manipulation to thrive. This is why the shift in perception surrounding you becomes so powerful. Once people recognize that you are not naive, they begin recognizing something deeper as well. They see that your patience was not a weakness, but a strength, guided by understanding. They see that your calmness was not confusion, but control, rooted in awareness. And once this realization settles into their minds, the way they interact with you and with others begins evolving. What started as a situation where someone believed they could take advantage of your kindness has now become something entirely different. It has become a lesson, not only for them, but for everyone who observed the moment. The lesson is simple yet profound. True strength often appears quietly. It does not always demand recognition or prove itself loudly. Sometimes it waits patiently until the truth reveals itself naturally. And when that truth finally emerges, the people who once underestimated you begin to see you clearly for the first time. Now they see you differently, continues unfolding in ways that go even deeper than the immediate shift in perception that first appeared after the situation was revealed. Because when someone's image of another person changes that dramatically, it does not stop at a single moment of realization. Instead, it continues influencing every interaction that follows. The people who once believed they understood you now begin noticing details they previously ignored. Small things that once seemed ordinary about your behavior suddenly stand out with new meaning. They remember the moments when you stayed silent while others argued, and now that silence no longer appears passive. Instead, it looks intentional, as though you were measuring the entire room before deciding what deserved your attention. They recall the calm way you responded when tension appeared, and what once seemed like tolerance now looks like emotional mastery. These reflections gradually reshape the entire narrative they once held about you. What is interesting about this transformation is that it does not only affect the individuals who misjudged you directly. It spreads quietly through the environment,
like a ripple moving across still water. People talk. They compare observations. Someone who witnessed one part of the situation shares it with another person who saw a different moment. Slowly, the pieces come together. And as the story forms, the perception surrounding you begins shifting beyond the immediate circle where the event occurred. Individuals who may not have been present during the original situation begin hearing about the way you handled it. They hear about your composure, your awareness, the way you allowed the truth to surface without unnecessary drama. And because stories like this travel quickly in environments where people are paying attention to character, your reputation begins evolving in ways you may not even notice immediately. This is how quiet strength often spreads influence without needing to seek recognition. People begin describing you differently when you are not present. Instead of using words like quiet, naive, or overly patient, they start using words like observant, composed, and perceptive. The same calm nature that once caused others to underestimate you now becomes the quality they respect the most. Because they understand something now that they did not see before. Calmness is not weakness when it is supported by awareness. Calmness becomes powerful when it comes from someone who fully understands the environment around them, but chooses restraint instead of reaction. As this understanding grows, the behavior of those around you continues changing in subtle but meaningful ways. The people who once attempted to manipulate the situation often become far more careful in how they interact with you. They know now that you notice details others miss. They know that your patience does not mean you are unaware. And that knowledge changes how they approach conversations, decisions, and even the tone they use when speaking with you. In many cases, this shift happens quietly, without anyone openly acknowledging it. No one needs to declare that their perception has changed. The change becomes visible through behavior instead. Where there was once casual disrespect, there is now caution. Where there was once assumption, there is now curiosity. And where there was once confidence in controlling the narrative, there is now uncertainty about whether such control was ever possible in the first place. Meanwhile, the people who observed your response with admiration often experience a different kind of transformation. Your example begins influencing the way they interpret strength in their own lives. Many people grow up believing that defending themselves requires aggression, that authority must be asserted loudly in order to be respected. But when they see someone maintain composure under pressure and still shift the entire outcome of a situation, it challenges those beliefs. They begin realizing that awareness can be more powerful than reaction, that patience can be more strategic than confrontation, and that dignity maintained during difficult moments often commands more respect than emotional victory ever could. These insights sometimes lead people to approach you differently as well. They may ask for your perspective more often because they recognize that you see patterns others overlook. They may trust your judgment in situations where clarity is needed because they have witnessed the calm reasoning behind your decisions. Over time, this quiet trust becomes one of the most powerful forms of influence a person can develop. Not because you demanded authority, but because people observed your character and concluded that your awareness carries value. Yet perhaps the most important transformation in this moment is the one that happens within the environment itself. When someone demonstrates that manipulation and underestimation can be exposed through calm awareness, it raises the standard of behavior for everyone around them. People begin realizing that hidden agendas are more easily revealed when someone in the room is paying close attention. They understand that emotional pressure loses power when the person they are targeting refuses to react impulsively. This awareness discourages many of the behaviors that once thrived in the shadows of assumption. Simply by existing with clarity and composure, you change the way others think about their own actions. The environment becomes more thoughtful, more careful, more aware of the dynamics that shape interactions. And all of this happens without you needing to dominate the situation or constantly remind people of what occurred. The shift continues quietly because truth has already revealed itself once. Once people see something clearly, it becomes difficult to pretend they do not understand it. In the end, the most remarkable part of this transformation is that it was never about proving anyone wrong. Your response was not designed to humiliate those who misjudged you or to claim victory over a situation. It was simply an expression of awareness meeting reality at the right moment. But because that awareness exposed the truth so clearly, it changed the way everyone involved now sees you. The calm person they once underestimated has become the person they recognize as perceptive, steady, and impossible to misread again. And once that realization settles into the minds of those around you, the respect that follows tends to remain long after the original situation has passed. Respect replaced their assumptions gradually becomes the final transformation in the entire situation. Because once the truth of someone's character has been revealed, people rarely return to the assumptions they once held. At the beginning, their perception of you was shaped by incomplete understanding. They saw calmness and interpreted it as weakness. They saw patience and assumed it meant ignorance. They saw your refusal to react impulsively and believed it meant you were unaware of the dynamics unfolding around you. Those assumptions allowed them to behave confidently, even recklessly, because they believed the situation was simple. In their mind, you were someone who could be easily predicted and easily controlled. Yet the moment reality revealed itself, the entire foundation of that belief collapsed. The person they thought they understood suddenly appeared far more perceptive than they had imagined. That moment of realization created something powerful in the minds of those who witnessed it. Respect. Respect often emerges not from loud displays of authority, but from moments where character becomes unmistakably clear. When someone demonstrates awareness under pressure, composure in difficult situations, and clarity when others expect confusion, people begin recognizing that they are standing in the presence of someone who operates differently. This recognition does not always appear dramatic. In many cases, it develops quietly as individuals process what they have witnessed. They begin replaying earlier moments in their minds, noticing how consistent your behavior had been from the very beginning. The patience you showed, the calm way you listened, the way you avoided unnecessary conflict. All of these actions now appear intentional rather than passive. The more they reflect on those moments, the more they understand that what they once dismissed as naivety was actually discipline guided by awareness. This realization changes the emotional atmosphere surrounding you. Where there was once casual confidence in underestimating you, there is now caution and curiosity. People begin watching you differently, not with suspicion, but with a sense of recognition that you perceive far more than you reveal. They notice the way you listen before speaking. They see the way you allow situations to unfold without rushing into judgment. And gradually, they understand that your strength lies not in dominating situations, but in understanding them fully before responding. Respect built in this way is far more powerful than the respect that comes from intimidation or authority. Intimidation often creates obedience out of fear, but it rarely creates genuine admiration. Authority imposed through force may control behavior temporarily, but it does not inspire trust. The respect you now receive grows from something deeper, the recognition of character. People see that your actions were not driven by ego or the desire to win an argument. Instead, They were guided by clarity and composure. This difference leaves a lasting impression on everyone who observed the situation unfold. Those who once misjudged you now begin adjusting their behavior in ways that reflect this new understanding. Conversations become more thoughtful because they know you notice details others overlook. Decisions involving you are approached with greater fairness because they recognize you are not someone who can be quietly manipulated. Even the tone people use when addressing you changes subtly, reflecting the respect that has replaced their earlier assumptions.
What is particularly interesting about this shift
Is that it often extends beyond the individuals directly involved in the original situation. Observers who witnessed how you handled the moment carry that impression forward into future interactions. They remember the composure you demonstrated when pressure was high. They remember the clarity of your response when the truth finally emerged. And because those moments revealed your character so clearly, they influence how others speak about you even when you are not present. Stories about situations like this often travel quietly through communities, workplaces, and social circles. People share what they observed, not because the moment was dramatic, but because it revealed something meaningful about the person involved. Over time, these conversations build a reputation that reflects your true nature more accurately than the assumptions that once existed.
Instead of being seen as the quiet person who can be overlooked, you become known as the individual who understands more than most people realize. This reputation is not built through self-promotion or the need to prove yourself repeatedly. It develops naturally because your actions demonstrated something others could not ignore. The calmness you maintained when others expected reaction, the patience you showed while observing the full situation, and the clarity you displayed when the moment arrived, all combined to reveal a form of strength that people respect deeply. And as this respect grows, something else begins changing as well. The environment around you gradually becomes more thoughtful. When people recognize that awareness exists within a space, they behave differently. They think more carefully about their actions because they understand that hidden intentions are more easily revealed when someone present is paying attention. This awareness encourages honesty, discourages manipulation, and raises the standard of behavior for everyone involved. In this way, your presence begins influencing the environment itself, not through control or authority, but through the example you set. People begin understanding that composure and awareness carry more influence than aggression ever could. They see that patience does not mean weakness, and that silence does not mean ignorance. Instead, they recognize that these qualities often belong to individuals who possess the clearest understanding of the situations unfolding around them. The transformation from assumption to respect becomes complete when people fully accept this new perspective. They no longer look at you through the lens of misunderstanding. Instead, they see someone who remained steady while others rushed to judgment. They see someone who allowed truth to reveal itself, rather than forcing a confrontation prematurely. And most importantly, they see someone whose strength did not depend on dominating the situation, but on understanding it completely. In the end, respect replaces assumption, because reality has made the difference impossible to ignore. The person they once underestimated has revealed a depth of awareness that cannot easily be dismissed. And once that recognition settles into the minds of those around you, the way they interact with you and the way they interpret your calm presence changes permanently. Quiet power always reveals itself, becomes the natural ending to everything that unfolded, because situations like this rarely conclude with loud victories or dramatic declarations. Instead, they end with clarity settling quietly into the minds of everyone who witnessed what truly happened. At the beginning,
The entire situation existed inside a misunderstanding. People believed they knew who you were.
They interpreted your calm nature as innocence, your patience as weakness, and your refusal to react impulsively as a lack of awareness. Those assumptions allowed them to behave in ways they might never have attempted if they had recognized the truth from the start. Yet the moment the truth surfaced, everything changed. The same calmness they once dismissed suddenly appeared as discipline. The silence they once misread now looked like observation. And the patience they believed they could exploit revealed itself as strategy guided by clarity. In that moment, the entire story surrounding you shifted. What they thought was naivety was actually awareness. What they believed was weakness was actually restraint. And what they assumed was ignorance was actually a quiet understanding of everything that had been happening all along. The most powerful part of this transformation is that it did not require aggression, conflict, or the need to prove yourself repeatedly. Your strength revealed itself simply through the way you carried yourself during the situation. You remained steady while others expected chaos. You remained observant while others rushed into reaction. And when the moment arrived where truth could no longer remain hidden, your clarity changed the entire dynamic without needing to dominate the situation. This is why quiet power often leaves the deepest impression. It does not fight for recognition or demand attention. It simply waits until reality speaks for itself. And once that reality becomes visible, the assumptions that once surrounded you dissolve naturally. The people who once underestimated you now understand something they could not see before. The calm person they believed they could control was actually the one who understood the entire situation from the very beginning.